The Formation. Case 15. Volume 2. The Pre-Credential. Filed from Treaty 4 Territory. Oskanaka Asasteki, Regina. Cases 7 through 9 documented the laundering of cabinet conduct through the credentials figures bring into office. This case documents where those credentials come from. A documented ecosystem of transatlantic and elite formation programs, Bilderberg, the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leaders, the Trilateral Commission, Chatham House, the Group of 30, the Council on Foreign Relations. Their published alumni lists overlap substantially with the cabinet and senior bureaucratic rosters of every Canadian federal government across both major parties since at least the 1970s. And the structural finding. The cross-partisan composition. The credentials are not owned by one Canadian party. The current Liberal Prime Minister holds essentially the ecosystem the former Conservative Prime Minister accumulated. That is, the load-bearing observation. And the laundering claim. A ninth layer of the volume's taxonomy. Source: the laundering of where the credential was generated, its transposition from the transnational space in which it was earned to the domestic space in which it is spent, with the source institution not named in the latter. The credential is real. The omission is the laundering. Section 1. The ecosystem, in one paragraph. The Bilderberg meeting, founded 1954, convenes approximately 120 to 150 figures from politics, finance, industry, and academia for off-the-record annual discussion under the Chatham House rule. The World Economic Forum, with its annual Davos meeting and its Forum of Young Global Leaders, founded 1993, identifies and credentials roughly 100 figures a year under the age of 40. The Trilateral Commission, founded 1973 by David Rockefeller. 3 regional groups. The North American group allots 87 United States seats, 20 Canadian seats, and 13 Mexican seats. Chatham House, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, plays the analogous role for the British and Commonwealth policy elite. Its rule of confidentiality lends its name to the whole category. The Group of 30 convenes 30 senior figures from finance and central banking. The Aspen Strategy Group and the Council on Foreign Relations, with its national affiliates, the Atlantic Council, the Canadian International Council, the German Marshall Fund, extend the same infrastructure across the Western Alliance. And these are hidden? No, they are real, documented, openly named, and unsurprising. Their alumni lists are, for the most part, on each program's own website. On their own terms, they are policy discussion communities. Examined as credential infrastructure, they are the documented institutional space in which a substantial portion of senior Canadian public officials across both major parties and across decades accumulated their pre-cabinet biographies. So the ecosystem is the given. The ecosystem is the given. The rest of the case names its Canadian alumni on the program's own records and the structure their cross-partisan distribution makes visible. Section 2. The Canadian alumni named. Mark Carney, the current Prime Minister, on his own World Economic Forum author profile. A member of Bilderberg, the chair of Chatham House, a member of the Group of 30, a former member of the WEF Foundation Board, Advisory Board Chair for Canada 2020, a longtime member of the Bank for International Settlements Board, appointed chair of its Global Economy Meeting and Economic Consultative Committee in December 2017. He attended Bilderberg in 2011, also as a steering committee member 2012 and 2019. Every one of these affiliations is on Carney's own published record. Freeland. Chrystia Freeland, former Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, was selected a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader in 2001, recorded on Columbia University's World Leaders Forum archive. Later, a member of the WEF Board of Trustees, the forum's highest governing body. A confirmed Bilderberg participant, a Rhodes Scholar, a former Reuters managing director, and the sitting Minister of Finance and National Revenue, François-Philippe Champagne, is a confirmed Bilderberg attendee.
The trilateral seat.
The North American Deputy Chair of the Trilateral Commission since 2014 is John Manley, former Liberal Deputy Prime Minister. The Canadian Deputy Chair seat has run continuously since 1986. J.H. Warren, then Alan Gottlieb, to 2013, then Jim Prentice, then Manley. Across nearly 4 decades, held by senior figures of both political traditions.
And the Conservatives.
Rona Ambrose, former leader of the Conservative Party, is a trilateral member. Jim Prentice, former Conservative federal minister and Alberta Premier, was North American Deputy Chair from 2013 to 2014. Jean Charest, former Conservative federal cabinet minister and Quebec Liberal Premier, is a current member on the Commission's own roster. Stephen Harper, before becoming Prime Minister, attended Bilderberg in 2003.
And across the aisle.
Bill Graham, Liberal Foreign Affairs and Defence Minister, trilateral member. Raymond Chrétien, member. Gary Doer, former NDP Premier of Manitoba, later Harper's appointed ambassador to the United States, member. The published Canadian roster also includes the Chair and CEO of ATCO, Nancy Southern, the Chair of Open Text, Thomas Jenkins, the CEO of Linamar, Linda Hasenfratz.
And Schwab's words.
Klaus Schwab, at Harvard, 2017, on the public record video. We penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday, I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of his cabinet, or even more than half of his cabinet, are actually young global leaders. The verbatim is on the record, whether it describes successful institution building or admits intentional infiltration is contested. This case quotes the words and reserves the interpretation. The credentials were produced upstream. The cabinets are where they are spent.
Section 2.5. The exhibit. We Charity.
The program's name so far are credential factories. Their output is real, but hard to trace transaction by transaction. We Charity is the same mechanism with a complete dated paper trail and a public collapse. Not a footnote, the load-bearing domestic exhibit. The one place a credential produced upstream can be watched being spent at the cabinet table, with receipts.
What was the credential?
Not a degree or a fellowship. Proximity laundered as virtue, a youth service brand that converted celebrity appearances into a relationship dense enough that, when roughly $912 million needed a vendor, the organization already paying the Prime Minister's family was framed as the only one capable of delivering.
The figures.
Stated as the disclosing bodies stated them. The Canada Student Service Grant, about $912 million, announced the 25th of June, 2020. A sole source agreement to We, no call for proposals. An administration fee first, stated near $19.5 million, against a ceiling of up to $43.5 million. Across 2016 to 2020, members of the Prime Minister's household were paid for appearances tied to We. Margaret Trudeau, roughly $250,000 to $312,000 across 28 events. The higher figure includes agency commission. Alexandra Trudeau, roughly $32,000 to $40,000 across 8. Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, $1,400 for a single 2012 event. By the Kielburger's testimony to the House Ethics Committee, the family total was about $217,500 in fees and $209,620 in expenses.
And the ethics finding, precisely.
Precisely, because the precision is the credibility. May 2021. The Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner found Finance Minister Bill Morneau breached the Conflict of Interest Act. He failed to recuse, his daughter was employed at WE, and he repaid about $41,000 in travel the organization had covered. The Commissioner found Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in an apparent conflict, but not in breach of the Act. Morneau breached, Trudeau did not. Any shorthand that collapses the two is false.
The forums versus this.
The forums are inference. We is receipts.
And the cross-partisan reading.
A two-layer asymmetry, not a flat everyone was guilty. At the formation layer, we was an all-party reputational utility. We Day drew patronage across the spectrum for years. Liberal and conservative governments both funded the brand. At the spend layer, the asymmetry appears. The sole source contract was a Liberal cabinet transaction, and the family payments ran to the Liberal Prime Minister's household and the finance ministers. The NDP was not a beneficiary. Jagmeet Singh was among the contract's sharpest critics. The credential is built by everyone. It is spent by whoever holds the cabinet. The partisanship lives at the spend stage. The capture lives at the formation stage.
Section 3. Cross-partisanship as the structural payload.
The single most consequential observation is that the roster is cross-partisan. Mark Carney, the current Liberal Prime Minister, holds essentially the same ecosystem of memberships that Stephen Harper, the former Conservative Prime Minister, accumulated. The Trilateral Commission's Canadian seats have, across decades, been held by figures of both major parties and several provincial premierships of varying orientation.
Why does that matter?
Because it makes the ecosystem a durable feature of Canadian public policy infrastructure, not a feature of any one government. Whichever party forms a government, a substantial fraction of its senior figures arrive in cabinet already credentialed by the same ecosystem. The figures who are not credentialed must build their careers the harder way or acquire the credentials in office.
So this isn't a partisan charge.
It is the opposite of one. The common framing says the party in power is a creature of the World Economic Forum. The structural finding is that the opposition party, in Canada, is a creature of the same ecosystem. Different affiliations, different selection ages, different program combinations, the same underlying architecture.
And that's the more durable claim.
It operates underneath partisanship, and it is the more durable for it. A change of government does not change the ecosystem. It changes which alumni of it are in cabinet.
Section 4. The ninth layer. Source.
The volume's taxonomy so far: reputation, accountability, capability, demographic, political, moral, temporal, tool, aggregation. This case adds a ninth. What is laundered here is the source of the credential. The figure arrives in cabinet with a biography that includes Bilderberg, the Trilateral Commission, the WEF programs, or Chatham House, and the biography is presented as the figure's own qualification for the role.
But the qualification is real.
It is. So is its source. The laundering is in the relationship between the two. The credential, generated in a transnational policy discussion ecosystem, is, in domestic Canadian discourse, framed as a credential the constituency electing the figure can rely on. and the constituency, in most cases, has no relationship with the institutional space in which the credential was generated.
Where exactly is the corruption?
Not in the credential, which is, on its own terms, legitimate. In the transposition, the credential is preserved in form. Its origin is laundered through omission. The figure is not described in domestic coverage as a trilateral member or a Bilderberg attendee. The figure is described as a senior figure with international experience. The credential travels in the biography, while its institutional source recedes from public visibility.
And who pays?
The Canadian public, whose electoral judgment is exercised on biographies whose source institutions are absent from the account. The smaller, less credentialed figures, whose paths are foreclosed by competition with the credentialed cohort. And the policy debates pre-shaped by the convergent inclinations of figures who spent decades in shared transnational spaces and arrive in office, regardless of party, with overlapping views of what is politically possible.
Section 5. Where this case meets the volume.
Case 7 documented 4 cabinet credential vectors. Case 15 documents the upstream ecosystem in which the climate finance vector, Carney, accumulates its weight. Bilderberg, the Bank for International Settlements, Chatham House, the Group of 30, the WEF Foundation Board. Read together, the two describe the credential's full life cycle, from formation through cabinet expenditure.
Case 8.
Case 8 documented the cross-partisan and celebrity credential vectors. Case 15 demonstrates the cross-partisan finding at the ecosystem level, trilateral seats and Bilderberg attendances accumulating across liberal and conservative careers in roughly comparable proportion.
Case 9.
Case 9 documented the post-cabinet acknowledgement pattern. Figures who, after leaving office, articulate the doubts they kept private while in post. Case 15 documents the pre-cabinet origin, where those certainties were first articulated, in private, off the record, under the Chatham House rule, in shared space with figures from other countries whose positions converged with theirs.
12 and 14.
Case 12 documented the access broker layer connecting public office credentials to vendor-side market entry. Case 15 names the credential production layer of which that brokerage is the downstream application. Case 14 documented the aggregation of incompatible roles across one biography, Grant Cook in Saskatchewan. Case 15 documents the federal analog, the aggregation of credentialing memberships across one biography, Mark Carney, who becomes Prime Minister with credentials whose institutional sources are not on the domestic record the way a predecessor's party internal credentials traditionally were.
The closing line.
The visibility is the case. None of this is hidden. The alumni lists are on the program's own websites. The constituencies who bear the cost have not, on average, had access to the institutional space in which the credentials were earned.
Section 6. On framing and discipline.
This case requires more discipline than any prior case in the volume because the subject area is heavily occupied by commentary whose framings the case does not adopt.
What does it name?
The existence and structure of the programs, the published Canadian alumni lists and individual memberships, the cross-partisan distribution, the Schwab penetration quotation, verbatim, and the laundering layer in which the source of the credential is transposed onto the figure's own biographical account.
What does it refuse?
Any claim that the programs coordinate Canadian policy, any claim that alumni take direction from them, any claim that policy convergence is the result of program participation rather than of the environment in which alumni were selected. The penetration, infiltration, takeover, puppet, and global cabal framings. The contested family characterizations, the CIA framing applied to the contemporary programs, and the Great Reset framing as a description of intent.
Why refuse them?
The reason is structural, not deferential. The argument that a documented ecosystem exists, that named figures are alumni, that the cross-partisan composition is load-bearing, is stronger stated without the overlays. It survives every adversarial check the records permit. The refused framings do not. Including them would weaken the argument by binding it to claims the records cannot sustain.
And the question you won't answer.
Selection versus formation. Do these programs recruit people who already think alike, or shape the thinking of people they recruit? It is structurally undecidable from the public record. The case observes the convergence. It does not name the mechanism that produced it.
Section 7. What this case does not claim.
It does not claim that Carney, Freeland, Manley, Ambrose, Charest, Graham, Chrétien, Prentice, Dewar, Harper, Trudeau, Singh, Champagne, or any named figure has acted in bad faith, illegally, contrary to the public interest, or under coordinated direction from any program of which they are alumni.
And the programs.
It does not claim the World Economic Forum, Bilderberg, the Trilateral Commission, Chatham House, the Group of 30, the Council on Foreign Relations, or the Aspen Strategy Group is a coordinating institution issuing policy direction to its alumni. The case attributes membership only.
The convergence.
It does not claim that convergence among alumni on monetary policy, climate finance, transatlantic security is the result of program participation. The selection versus formation question is undecidable from the public record. The case observes the convergence. It does not name the mechanism.
The framings.
It does not adopt penetration, infiltration, takeover, puppet, Great Reset, globalist, or global cabal framings. Schwab's 2017 statement is on the record and quoted as a fact about what was said. The interpretation that it admits intentional infiltration is not adopted. It does not adopt the CIA framing applied to the contemporary post-Cold War programs. That allegation is contested, the programs deny it, and case-grade evidence is not on the public record at the required granularity.
Then what does it claim?
This, a documented ecosystem of transatlantic and elite formation programs produces credentials whose holders, on the program's own published records, include a substantial fraction of senior Canadian federal figures across both major parties and across decades. The credentials are real. The memberships are public on the program's own websites. The cross-partisan distribution places them outside the normal frame of partisan critique. And in domestic discourse, the source of these credentials is generally not part of the routine biographical account of the figures holding them. That omission is the laundering.
The last word.
The ecosystem is real. The alumni are listed. The credentials are documented. The constituencies have not, on average, had access to the institutional space in which the credentials were earned. Their electoral judgment is exercised on biographies whose source institutions are mostly absent. That is the structural finding. The case observes the relationship between the two and leaves the evaluation to the reader.